Yes, ma'am. Hello, everyone. I welcome you all on behalf of TheDaak to our Baithak. The Dark began in 2023 as a book review journal, publishing original reviews across disciplines and genres. From the start, we sought to reimagine the form of the book review itself, encouraging writing that moves beyond summary to engage deeply, reflectively, and creatively with the world a book opens up. Over time, we grew into a biannual academic journal that now includes reviews, explainers, commentaries, and research essays. Each issue is built around a central theme, bringing together diverse voices that explore the intersections across social sciences. Our double-blind peer review process ensures rigor, while our editorial approach values accessibility and creative thought. Beyond the journal, The Dark has grown into a vibrant collective. Through our reading groups, we meet every month to discuss a shared book, discovering new perspectives through conversation. Through The Dark Weekly, we publish personal essays, topical reflections, and explainers that extend our conversations into the present moment. The Dark Baithak is our humble attempt to huddle around a small gathering of scholars, writers, students from different fields to present ideas and initiate dialogue, bringing critical conversations to life. It is now my pleasure to introduce a speaker for today's Baithak, Dr. Tejal Khanna. She is an assistant professor at the Department of Political Science, Geetham School of Humanities and Social Sciences. Geetham University, Dr. Khanna received her doctorate of philosophy in international organization from Jawaharlal Nehru University, India, and a master's of philosophy MPhil degree in international politics from Jawaharlal Nehru University, India. Her field of research interests are United Nations, India's foreign policy, statelessness and refugee crisis, maritime security, and forced migration. Dr. Khanna has also published several scholarly articles and book chapters with leading publishers such as Taylor and Francis, Palgrave Macmillan, and Sage. We are welcome we are we are welcoming our discussant for today, Dr. Sanjukta Nath. She is an assistant professor in the University School of Liberal Arts, Guru Gobind Singh Indraprasth University. She specializes in gender, international politics, international law, sexual and gender-based violence in conflict and masculinities. She holds a doctorate degree from the Center for International Politics, Organizations and Disarmament, Jawaharlal Nehru University. Sanjukta is also an editor at The Dark. She envisions and directs interdisciplinary academic conversations. I think we should start the presentation now.
Yes. Tejal,
Yeah.
Dr. Khanna, the floor is yours now. You have about 25 to 30 minutes, but if you were to kind of cross that threshold, it isn't going to be a problem. Over to you.
Thank you for being lenient. Okay. Thank you, Adya, for that kind introduction. I would now begin sharing my screen, and please let me know if you're able to see my slides. I hope the slides are visible. Yeah. Thank you. All right, just 1 second. Okay. So, for today's talk, I would be looking at two of my published pieces that came out last year. One of these was a journal article in Asian Journal of Comparative Politics. It is titled as Hostile Environment or Internal Pathology, an examination of UNHCR's protection mandate with respect to Rohingya refugees in India. And the second article is a book chapter that was published in the book titled as Reshaping Rohingya Futures. And that looks at the UNHCR's field mission in Bangladesh. Both of these works stem from my PhD research. Originally, this was actually one long chapter in my PhD thesis, but I split it into two. And what we would be seeing is UNHCR and its field mission, the way it has operated in both these countries, India and Bangladesh, there are very, very similar outcomes that come to the foreground. So thank you for coming here to listen about how the UNHCR as an organization, as an international organization, assists Rohingya refugees. What are the challenges that it faces in doing so? And a key question that I'm asking is the difficulty that UNHCR faces in operating in these countries, India and Bangladesh. Is it just stemming from the fact that both these countries are non-signatories to the relevant international conventions, such as the 1951 Refugee Convention and the 1954 and the 1961 Statelessness Conventions? Or is it also because of the internal bureaucratic culture that the UNHCR has developed as an organization that also impedes it from really performing well and actually protecting and upholding the rights of the Rohingya refugees? Before we dive into these articles, I want to briefly explain as to why I'm taking the Rohingya case study, and it is a single case study. And why do Rohingyas matter, both academically and politically? Rohingyas remain as the largest stateless population globally. And by stateless population, I mean they are originally from Myanmar, but they have been stripped of their citizenship status. And when a person is stripped of their citizenship status, they become stateless. That's what I mean by the term stateless. And a famous political theorist, mm, Hannah Arendt, actually said that citizenship is basically the right to have rights. So once you are stripped of your citizenship status, you are basically stripped of all your other rights, primarily your access to healthcare, education, and employment. They all are taken away. So, for decades, the Rohingyas have faced widespread human rights violation, persecution, because of which they have been forced to flee Myanmar. Since 1970s, they have been facing this persecution. And it was in 1982 with the promulgation of the 1982 citizenship law in Myanmar that we see the whole statelessness status of them was institutionalized. And they hold the dual status of not just being stateless, but also refugees. And it is here where my work looks at how these refugees who do not possess uh, a citizenship and so are stateless refugees, how they are doubly disadvantaged. And what are the challenges that the UNHCR, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, faces in assisting them? On your slide, this is also a painting that was drawn by me, and it was digitally exhibited in the 2024 World Conference on Statelessness that was held in Malaysia. And if you see this painting, though it's quite simplistic, but it depicts what is actually happening to the life of Rohingyas. So the tennis ball here represents the Rohingyas. The ball is not in green color, it has turned black, which denotes the lifelessness that is coming in with the deprivation of the human rights that Rohingyas are facing. And the racket represents this very tight sovereign state system where states across the world are deciding whether to have them within their own countries or not, whether to give them asylum or not. And they have been stripped of their nationality. They are just there at the mercy of states. And so this relationship is always there, a very uneasy relationship between the states and the Rohingyas. So I first look at the journal article that examines UNHCR's protection mandate in India. So I'm looking at how what are the constraints, what are the challenges that the UNHCR faces in protecting stateless Rohingya refugees in a non-signatory state like India. By a non-signatory state, I mean a country that has not signed on to the relevant international conventions, such as the 1951 Refugee Convention and also the 1954 and 1961 Statelessness Conventions. I'm not going in detail into these conventions, but just to give you a brief overview, these international conventions protect the rights of refugees and stateless persons, and it is considered as a good practice for states to ratify these conventions. India has not signed on to these conventions, and so has Bangladesh. So, first, we are looking at the India case. So, now, prima facie, it may look that because India has not signed on to these conventions, the main constraints for UNHCR field mission is only coming from its environment as it is based in India. But my research looks at that this is not the only case. That is just one part of the story. It's also important to look at the bureaucratic pathologies that have developed within the UNHCR that also impede it from actually fulfilling its protection mandate with respect to Rohingya refugees. And to explain this, I am using an eclectic theoretical framework. I'm combining the constructivist approach of Barnett and Finnemore and the sociological approach of Ness and Brechen. These scholars are very much studied in the international organization literature. The constructivist approach of Barnett and Finnemore sees international organizations, IOs, as actors that are not just tools of states, but they are actors in their own right. They shape world politics. They try to make rules for the world through their epistemic authority. And in that process of trying to develop their own authority and autonomy, they also develop bureaucratic pathologies or dysfunctional behaviors that limit their effectiveness. Two pathologies that I would be looking at in my work is the bureaucratic universalism of the UNHCR, wherein it develops very internal, rigid culture of doing things, where there is no flexibility at all, nor there is any sensitivity paid to the local context. And the other pathology that I'm looking at is that of insulation, where the UNHCR repeatedly ignores critical environmental feedback, which, if it pays heed to, could actually lead to improving its performance. The sociological approach of Ness and Brechen uh, combines organizational theory with international relations. And according to Ness and Brechen, international organizations are embedded in specific environments. They have their own structure, goals, and it is the environment that shapes their character and performance. Just as how an organism is very much affected by its surrounding environment, this is how international organizations as organisms are very much affected by the environment in which they are embedded. And so here, India being a non-signatory state, gives that uniquely constraining environment to the UNHCR as an actor. So this I've talked about, the pathology of insulation, very important to engage with this concept because what I would be doing in my work and what I've actually done is seen how the UNHCR has been repeatedly ignoring the feedback that is coming from its environment, and this environment consists of its implementing partners. So implementing partners of UNHCR are primarily the NGOs that are working on the ground in supporting the UNHCR to fulfill its protection mandate. The refugees themselves, and also other lawyers and civil society activists. So, this is what I mean by the actors important in the environment which are giving the feedback to the UNHCR. And what the pathology of insulation in IOs basically points to is the IO develops rigid internal cultures that focus on procedural compliance over meaningful outcomes. So this is also my research design. Um, Although the sample size of the Rohingya refugees whom I interviewed, it was quite small, but this is not a methodological weakness in my perspective, because these refugees had the UNHCR cards. Were they had come from Bangladesh. They had settled in India, and they these Rohingyas were having valid UNHCR cards, and it is only these refugees that I have interviewed. Other refugees who are seen as asylum seekers, that is, they have not yet received the UNHCR cards, I have not included their testimonies in my work. But I have also relied on a number of key informant interviews from Rohingya activists. I was primarily working as a research intern in the Rohingya Human Rights Initiative. This is an organization um, that was started in 2017, around the time I started doing my PhD. And it also is a very important organization in being a voice for the Rohingyas in India. And I also interviewed other lawyers and UNHCR implementing partners, um, like the COVA, the DAJI, and the Human Rights Law Network. And because of COVID, the interviews were conducted remotely. However, there was a lot of information that I received from these implementing partners, especially the deep frustration that these partners had with respect to the functioning of the UNHCR. No verbal consent was procured from the refugees. Refugees were very fearful of signing anything, and they also had problems in trusting people because previously they had honestly told about all their struggles to journalists, and the journalists had revealed their names, which got them into a lot of trouble. So the small sample size does reflect a lot of distrust, but because of my positionality as a researcher who was also quite sympathetic to the cause of the Rohingyas, that they should have citizenship rights, they should be Myanmar citizens. Because of that positionality, I was able to get that solidarity from them, and they opened up to me. So, moving on, India's refugee policy is quite, ad hoc, in the sense that it has been very hospitable to Tibetan and Sri Lankan Tamils. However, at the same time, it has labeled Rohingyas as illegal immigrants. What we see is 2017 being a very, a, a watershed year in the whole political climate of India, wherein what we see is that Rohingyas were targeted as was labeled as illegal immigrants by the Indian government. Prior to 2017, it was in 2012 that Rohingyas were able to stage a protest outside the UNHCR office in Delhi. They were able to get recognition, and they were able to get long-term visas as well. But everything changed in 2017. Their long-term visas were revoked and deportations began. And this has continued till present. Even last year, there were allegations that about 40 Rohingyas were just dumped uh, into, they were flown from Delhi and they were dumped into the Bay of Bengal off the coast of Myanmar. So these deportations continue. Um, Several Rohingyas have been also detained, and adding to this constrained political environment is also the fact that even the Supreme Court um, does not block these kind of deportations. The Supreme Court has in fact is also seeing them as illegal immigrants from Myanmar, and it has not upheld the right to non-refoulement for the Rohingyas staying in India. So a right to refoulement is a really important right in customary international law, wherein a refugee should not be sent back to their country of origin if they continue to face fears of persecution and a fear of losing their life. However, Supreme Court also has not upheld this right to non-refoulement. So this is how it's a very constrained political environment where uh, in which the UNHCR situated in. So the main UNHCR dilemma is it cannot publicly criticize the government of India as it risks being expelled from India directly. But at the same time, UNHCR is exhibiting its own institutional failures. Um there are testimonies of Rohingyas saying that when they went to the UNHCR Delhi office for this procedure of refugee status determination, they had to wait for 6 to 8 hours in queues for filling their application forms without basic facilities like drinking water. Rohingyas have to travel from different parts of India at their own cost to the two offices of UNHCR. There are only two offices in India, the UNHCR Delhi office and the UNHCR Chennai office. And those two offices are not really enough to take this caseload. Um, Also, the implementing partners of UNHCR have been very critical of the organization. Um, one of the organizations, COVA, that works in Hyderabad. In fact, the CEO of that organization, Mazhar Hussain, told me that we just felt so controlled by the UNHCR. It just is a very, very bureaucratic organization. And so they actually withdrew from this whole partnering with the UNHCR. And there are these lawyers who have been continuously saying that UNHCR needs to be more responsive to the rights of Rohingya refugees, but that has not really happened. One important aspect that Afif, as a lawyer, he remarks that Rohingyas and their vulnerability is very different from, say, an Afghan refugee or a Syrian refugee. Those refugees, firstly, they have their nationality. Their nationality is still intact. And another, they also have access to language. They speak English, so they are easily able to get jobs in restaurants. But that's not the case with Rohingyas. Mostly Rohingyas end up being rag pickers, um, or work at the construction site. Another important case that I highlight is one of the interpreters who was working with the UNHCR. He had flagged that there is a case of trafficking of three girls that is ongoing. He wanted the UNHCR to be involved in this to, at least get the social support needed to inform the police, the government, but nothing of that sort happened. And the UNHCR, in fact, shut this Rohingya interpreter and told him that don't be involved in such things. So there has been that continued silence that UNHCR has um continued with when it comes to really being an advocate of Rohingya rights. So it has chosen silence over advocacy when it comes to its protection, fulfilling its protection mandate in India. Another important point that I want to flag is, this whole thing about treating Rohingyas as just refugees and not seeing that they also are stateless. They also have, they are also doubly disadvantaged. There is an additional precarity that comes with the whole status of being stateless. So they are more disadvantaged than refugees who have their citizenships. Um, so that is something that the UNHCR is not able to do. For example, um, there is this procedure called as refugee status determination that Rohingya does for any Rohingya who wants to secure the UNHCR card. And there are a variety of questions that are asked from the Rohingyas. However, why is it that that the UNHCR shies away from doing a similar statelessness determination procedure for these Rohingyas as well? It shies away because UNHCR sees statelessness as only a legal problem that the states need to solve. Um, and it's very difficult for a person to prove that they are stateless because you are proving a negation, which is very difficult. You are trying to prove that you do not have documents and so you are stateless. So that becomes a very difficult task indeed. So if UNHCR could actually start doing statelessness determination procedures, and many of the activists and scholars have actually suggested that UNHCR must do this, things could actually be better for the Rohingyas. And it is also something which um, policy experts within the UNHCR have recommended. So there is an important recommendation that came from Helen Lee Lambert in 2014, and she had said that in the whole definition of being a refugee, you uh, see this whole factor of persecution, and persecution is also dependent upon arbitrary deprivation of nationality. So this whole condition of being stateless is actually being persecuted. So in that sense, there is nothing that stops the UNHCR from doing an SDP, but it is trying not to be a political organization. And I do tell in my other Bangladesh chapter where in a UNHCR official actually just says that we are an apolitical organization, but that seriously is not the case. UNHCR does function from its own political logic and the logic of being institutionally relevant and not to upset the states. These are some of the voices from the field. Um, this prominent Rohingya activist, Sabir Shomin, he says that UNHCR is simply acting helpless at a time when Rohingyas are in desperate need. In fact, one of the lawyers from Law and Policy Research Institute was so frustrated. He said, "We just want to file a court case against the UNHCR." So I would say that it is both the environment. The environment consists of a very politically constrained environment for the UNHCR, India being a non-signatory to the statelessness conventions, the refugee convention. It strips UNHCR of the whole legal leverage that it can get. Rohingyas are also labeled as illegal immigrants, and UNHCR is quite dependent upon the host state cooperation. But at the same time, it's not just the environment, it's also its own internal pathologies, primarily the pathology of insulation, where UNHCR continues to dismiss the feedback coming from its own implementing partners and refugees. It also tries to just have uniform rules for all refugees, which leads it to adopting a very pigeonholed approach, a very bureaucratic, rigid approach of statelessness not being distinguished from ordinary refugee status. The moving on to the second article, which is my book chapter, there are very similar claims made in this chapter as well. Bangladesh remains as a non-signatory to these conventions, and in both India and Bangladesh, um, refugees are treated just as foreigners. There is no refugee law, and it becomes very difficult to really protect their rights. There are just two things that I want to flag in this chapter, which is this biometric registration controversy that took place. So in 2018, so just to give you um, a brief overview of how Rohingyas have escaped from Myanmar, there have been four waves of forced displacement of Rohingyas from Myanmar in 1990s, in late 1980s, in 1990s, in 2012, and then in 2017. There was a mass exodus of Rohingyas that happened in 2017. Over 8 lakh refugees had entered Bangladesh. And it was after this whole mass exodus in 2017 that the whole Rohingya problem came to the forefront. It grabbed the international visibility that was needed. And right now, even as we speak, there is an ongoing case against Myanmar government for causing a genocide against the Rohingyas at the International Court of Justice. Um, so after 2017, when this mass exodus happened and most of the Rohingyas escaped to Bangladesh, it was here that a registration exercise took place. In where UNHCR collaborated with the Bangladesh government, and they came up with these smart cards where Rohingyas were seen as forcibly displaced Myanmar nationals. And the Rohingyas were so unhappy with this kind of a classification because it was giving um the legitimacy to the government of Bangladesh narrative that Rohingyas are irregular economic migrants, they are undocumented Myanmar nationals. So they really wanted their ethnicity, Rohingya, to be there on the smart card. They wanted to be recognized as refugee, but that didn't happen. Primarily because government of Bangladesh does not want to locally integrate Rohingyas. It sees them as a pressure on its already dwindling national resources, and that's why this terminology has been preferred by the government of Bangladesh. But UNHCR, uh, by collaborating with Bangladesh, was seen as a colluder with the Bangladesh government, and also trying to perpetrate then genocide against the Rohingyas by uh, collaborating with the government of Bangladesh. So there was a lot of criticism of UNHCR at that time. Organizations like the Human Rights Watch criticized UNHCR that they didn't even take informed consent from Rohingyas, and they have shared the data of them with others. I also checked with some other independent activists working on in the field, and there's this lady Chris Leva. She heads the Arakan project, and she was able to at that time talked to several refugees, and she confirmed to me that yes, a data leak of the Rohingyas had taken place, because of which they were fearful that they will be repatriated, they will be sent back to Myanmar, even when the conditions don't exist really for their return. Widespread persecution, human rights violations continue to take place. Villages of Rohingyas have been set to fire, and there is currently a military government there, and in all in that environment, to even talk about return was difficult. Chris Leva also actually affirmed that the biometric and personal data of Rohingyas was shared with the Myanmar government because UNHCR chose to collaborate with the Bangladesh government, and through that collaboration, Bangladesh government actually had shared the data. So all of these practices puts Rohingyas and their security, their right to life at risk. Um, Even after, and Rohingyas have been actually putting up mass protests against the UNHCR. However, there has been no heed. The UNHCR has not paid any heed to the feedback coming. And this is something that I want to leave you with is the UNHCR, one UNHCR official that I interviewed, they were very tight-lipped about what information they would share with me. And they just told me that as a UN refugee agency, we are an apolitical organization. We just want to support the government. And if the Bangladesh government only wants to send the Rohingyas back to Myanmar, we can't do anything about it. We can't really push Bangladesh to look at other durable solutions like local integration or third country resettlement. So, to conclude, what we are actually seeing in both these cases is, since the UNHCR displays these dysfunctional behavior, displays these pathologies, and it tries to assume that it knows the best when it comes to protecting the rights of refugees, there is a paternalistic behavior that comes about. Refugee voices are sidelined. The civil society, NGOs, policy and evaluation experts within its UNHCR, their voices are dismissed. And all of this is to perhaps also protect organizational survival in these difficult uh, political terrains of India and Bangladesh. So this is just a summary of what I've just spoken about. Yeah. Finally, I want to talk about the challenges that I faced in publishing my work. Um, we only share on LinkedIn the success about publishing this article, that article, but I thought I would use this opportunity to talk about rejections. My work faced at least 4 to 5 rejections from different journals. This is just one example of a Taylor and Francis journal which rejected my work twice. Uh, the first time they came up with the reviewers' comments, and I disagreed with some of the reviewers' comments, and the editor agreed with me that the reviewer language was not appropriate, and they gave me another chance to do a fresh submission. But again, when the fresh submission happened, the reviewers wanted me to do certain revisions, but the editor just disagreed. And there are no reasons given for this final decision of the editor. And the biggest irony was that this same journal asked me to review some other manuscripts while they had rejected my manuscript twice. So, one thing that I faced is also that in this whole field of refugee studies, statelessness studies, many of the reviewers that are chosen for these journals, they're not very familiar with the literature on seeing international organizations and as actors in global governance. That IOs also can have pathologies, that they are not neutral actors of the states. So many reviewers wanted me to tone down the criticism of the UNHCR. They were trying to tell me that there is nothing new that I am arguing. Uh, they wanted me to not be so critical about the UNHCR. They wanted to push the blame on just the states. But here I was trying to say that it's not just the environment, but also the internal culture of UNHCR that also shapes such protection outcomes. So, yes, it has been a difficult journey. I just submitted major revisions of another article to another journal. Again, that article stems from my PhD research. Why I'm saying all of this and mentioning about rejection is that if at all you are at that stage of facing rejection, please do not be disheartened. It is very, very common. However, it is not discussed openly. Um, it is not, uh, you know, a verdict on how good a scholar you are or how bad a scholar you are. Perhaps what one can see is how authentic the criticism is, whether it's really important to work on those criticism and better the article or to just move to another journal. So, yes, thank you for your patient listening. Um, I would really look forward to the discussion and feedback.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for this wonderful presentation. I would now like to invite Dr. Sanjukta Nath to take the discussion forward.
Thank you, Dr. Khanna. I think it was when I was reading and how you presented the entire thing, at least the whole idea of how IOs are working these days and the criticisms of IOs not being talked about, be it in any field, right? So something that I have not come up in many works. There could be most of the works, because since I also look at gender aspect and everything, most of the works are either blaming the country, the structure, the system, but nobody goes back to the UN and says, listen, this is somewhere is the problem that you are having internally also, which is not being looked at that much. Yes, Jigyasa.
I'm so sorry, Dr. Nath. Sanjukta, if
On the
I think something is up with the mic, you're clearer in between and then it goes a little haywire. So either like speak a little bit into the mic and a little louder, maybe.
ठीक है सुनाई दे रही है अभी
Now this is better.
okay
This is better.
okay yeah so what I was saying ki it is somewhere the whole discourse on IOs, be it regional IOs or international IOs, the literature is very much limited to how the functionality of IOs or just looking at the functional approaches of IOs and how successfully are they working. So to come across some kind works on also criticizing others for just because of their own inherent pathologies, bureaucracies is something which we need to work more and talk more about it also. Because scholars like us were coming from a down south or global south, difficult to get access. I think getting an access to it is also a problem. Secondly, getting a person who can let us have give you stories, information, doing the whole research. That's also once you do it, and then the whole difficulty of publication, as you've mentioned. So thank you so much for bringing it out. I think I both of them. I read both of it. So can we like start like one questions and you answer, or do you want me to like ask you like two questions and then how do you want to go about it? I'm audible, right?
Yeah,
Audible.
you're audible. Maybe if you have more, like if you have a number of questions, maybe Tejal could
ना
club
हाँ
two
जी
of them at a time, and then we can, yeah, two at a
yeah
time.
ठीक है no मेरा I have my first question is a very basic theoretical like whenever you start a research the both constructivist and sociological lens when you are talking about both are constructivist is also seen to be sociological in nature since we're talking about how social construction of everything so it's there so it's both overlapping so one that and also I think do you think while looking at the method if you look at the whole structural functionalism theory would it have helped you more because then we would have started directly looking at the functional approach of the IOs. Right. One would be very basic. Second, I think since everybody is there, I would really like you to like, it's a very simple question, but can you first, the whole discourse on refugees, statelessness, people, asylum seeker, post displaced. Because since we have so many conventions, and I think in your paper you said the problem with UNHCR is that they are sticking to the two to see that those two conventions are separate. And even if one person is falling into both conventions, you are looking at them separately, right? So I think if we could start enumerating this statelessness discussion and the refugees and asylum seekers and how thin the line of differentiation because it's quite similar because once we talk about other kind of refugees also like be it Sri Lankan refugees, be it Syrian refugees and all, everybody is different and everybody will have a different context. But since we are the international organization of international environment work in a universalizing tendencies, right? They tend to universalize everything. So somewhere if we could see how internationally we could make can there be a convention or can be some kind of MOU or understanding where we could define them in a way that it becomes more inclusive. Third, right now it will be my third. If it's, I would like to then come across and see, do you think this paternalizing behavior of UNHCR can be seen in other cases too? Rohingyas clearly yes, but then when we have Syria and then we have whenever there's a refugee crisis in Europe, the whole global south and global north also plays a very big role. Whose concerns are met on, whose boundaries are being shaped. Global south can be a dump yard also. There are also conversations on that. National security. So can we see that there is a distinction of how refugees, stateless persons from global north are treated differently and global south are treated differently?
Okay, those are three and a half questions, or probably four. So, we'll request Dr. Nath to pause a bit, and then the ball is in Dr. Khanna's court now. So, Tejal, why don't you respond to a couple of these questions, because I realize these are heavy questions. First, about the approach itself, constructivism, and that alone probably you'd require some time. So let's go to Tejal now and let her respond, and then we come back to more questions if Sanjukta still has them, and then we'll open the floor for participants.
Okay, thank you so much, Sanjukta. Those are really important reflections. To begin with, this whole overlap between sociological and constructivist approach, yes, there is an overlap, but there are important fundamental differences. They may look similar superficially, but they are fundamentally different. Why I say so is because if you look at the constructivist approach of Barnett and Finnemore, they are primarily studying international organizations, and their work itself, titled as Rules for the World, they see that how international organizations act as bureaucracies. They try to show that they are the experts in understanding and solving the refugee crisis. They are the very important actors in global governance, wherein they are the ones who are giving the technical advice to states on how to resolve, whether it means, giving refugee status, giving asylum to refugees, or where it comes to, giving the whole citizenship to stateless individuals. So, uh, they are focused on international organizations, and they look at international organizations as bureaucracies and how these bureaucracies create meaning out of the social world is what Barnett and Finnemore are looking at. So even within the whole constructivist approach to international relations, they are only looking at international organizations and how in this process of trying to augment their authority, autonomy, to show that yes, they are also independent actors and they are not just dependent on states. In that whole process of augmenting their authority, they develop dysfunctional behaviors where they are not able to think out of the rules. They're so bound to the rule book, and they're so bound to the rigidities that they're not able to innovate, and they're not able to actually pay heed to the feedback coming from the environment. And this is exactly how bureaucracies behave. So that's why I chose that framework. And when you come to Ness and Brechin, yes, I've not dwelled in deeper in this framework, but I've only borrowed the concept of the environment that they talk about. But if we go deeper into their analysis, they look at organizations as organisms, and it is the environment that is going to affect their performance. Environment has certain factors that will impact the performance of an organization, whether they will be able to fulfill the mandate they have been given or not. So here, the UNHCR has been tasked with the mandate of protecting the rights of refugees. So whether or not the UNHCR would be able to fulfill that mandate, and how well it would perform in doing so, is dependent upon certain factors and how it is embedded into that environment. So, why I'm bringing in this factor of environment is that it would be different from how UNHCR is, say, functioning in a country which is a signatory state. But then that also raises questions, and I am thinking about that say the UNHCR functioning in the UK. And the UK has been seen as, having deals with Rwanda to send those refugees, and they just want to dump those refugees in Rwanda. So I am also thinking about, does it really matter for a state to be even a signatory to these international conventions? Even the states such as the UK, those are signatories to these important conventions, even those are flouting such international norms. So, I am thinking about that. But why at this point this is important is, it's important to see how UNHCR field missions behave differently in different political climates. Each country's political climate is different. And India is very unique in that sense that it has been hospitable to certain refugees. These are called as the non-mandate refugees, the Sri Lankan Tamils and the Tibetans. They have received direct state assistance. So there is a selective refugee policy that India is following. Um, but why have the Rohingyas been singled out? In fact, even the Afghan refugees, the Syrian refugees, the refugees from Iraq, they also have, they have received much better treatment when they are holding the UNHCR card, which says that they will not be sent back to the country from where they have faced persecution. That holds much more value than a Rohingya holding that UNHCR card, because they have been labeled as illegal immigrants by the government of India. And this labeling has not happened to the other refugees. So that's where the political climate becomes very important. Even with respect to the Bangladesh, if you see the political climate there, the whole labeling of the Rohingyas. So all those Rohingyas who came in 1990s and did not repatriate back to Myanmar, their condition is way much better than those Rohingyas that have entered Bangladesh in 2017. So there are some 30,000 refugees that continue to stay in Bangladesh. They were not able to go back to Myanmar in the early 1990s. And these refugees have been able to locally integrate in Bangladesh, and many of them have been able to even find resettlement abroad. So they have a much better position than the other refugees. So the political climate itself is quite nuanced. Even the whole way, the approach in which the courts of India and Bangladesh have seen refugees is different. The Supreme Court has upheld that there is, they are illegal migrants and they need to be sent back to Myanmar. But at the same time, in Bangladesh, that has not been the case. Their right to asylum has been upheld in the court of Bangladesh. So there are minute differences in the political climate. And that's why I chose the Ness and Brechen framework to also show that, how the environment impacts the performance of an international organization. Coming to this whole discourse of refugees, stateless people, asylum seekers, this whole discourse, yes, I've not gone in detail in my work. There were also word limits, which I had to adhere to. But yes, for the benefit of audience, I would say that refugee studies has been a very much established field. There has been a lot of criticism of the UNHCR when it has come to, protecting the rights of refugees. But statelessness, and as a field of study, has in fact emerged only in 2014. Um, in fact, there is this scholar Laura Van Was, who says that till 2014, it was just seen as a forgotten human rights agenda. And it is only in 2014 that we see that it comes to the forefront, especially because of UNHCR, that it launches a campaign called as the I Belong campaign, wherein it wants to eradicate statelessness from the world, which means that every person must belong to a country. They must have citizenship of one country. They have the right to a legal identity, which is also there embedded in the Sustainable Development Goals. So it is here where this whole question about statelessness, and it drew the attention of scholars. Now we are also seeing several scholars criticizing the way UNHCR has approached this whole framework of its I Belong campaign as well. wherein it has tried to dominate the framework. It has tried to show that it knows best of how to solve statelessness, and no other actor really knows. So it is the primary actor that is going to give technical advice to states. But when it comes to taking responsibility, when it comes to taking feedback, then the UNHCR will just put the states under the bus, and they would just say, "It's we are just an apolitical organization. We are just here to support the states." So all of this is something that I want to look at. Um, and that's why I chose the case of Rohingyas, who are not just refugees but also stateless. And because of the rigid categories that UNHCR has made, that there are two separate conventions, one dealing only with refugees, one dealing only with stateless persons. That's why we just cannot combine the two. We cannot come up with an innovative solution. And it also goes back to history, because if you see, interestingly, this was supposed to be only one convention. But because of the political interests of states, wherein they thought that UNHCR should not really interfere with states and their decision to grant nationality to an individual, that is how these this one convention actually got split. So, but again, what we see in the case of stateless Rohingya refugees is how, because of that historical division between the two conventions, the problems that we are facing now, wherein UNHCR is not able to innovate when it comes to dealing with refugees who have the dual status of also being stateless. Uh, yes, paternalism of UNHCR has happened in other cases of refugees. There is literature as well. However, my focus here was looking at how these two theoretical frameworks, building on these two theoretical frameworks, help us to look at how paternalism is functioning in the behavior of UNHCR. I hope this makes sense.
Yes, yes, it does. Sanjukta, do you have more questions?
I just want to one last.
Yeah, of course. No.
One
You're the
last.
discussant. You're allowed these questions. You don't
No,
have to.
I want to know, because I read in your Bangladesh chapter about the rights of the children, right? So from there, if I could stretch a bit and then say that there have been so much international laws and norms on, like, particularly everything you have. However, the whole aspect of state plus the organization both matter. How a state is looking at the international law itself or the convention itself. Somewhere, the children's that you have talked about, can you, I think this is somewhere a point where we need, there are children from since 1990s who have not been who do not have any state. So they are the ones who are clearly stateless, right? One is this, and second, also, what about the norms? And where do norms do matter? Where do norms stand right now? We have been talking about norms, rights, everything, right? Basic. These are like right to dignity. Life is something since 19, what was it? Rights of men, since rights of men, right? Let us not. So the children. There have been several conventions, several MOU understanding on rights of children. So where do we see this? The convention on the children right? That would be something that it is very interesting plus saddening both to see and reflect on the whole situation of children. I think it was not only in Bangladesh, right? In India, you did not mention it. Yeah.
Could I respond to this? Yeah. Thank you so much for bringing this up. So, statelessness actually could be caused through a variety of factors. And one such factor is also called as intergenerational statelessness. Like, if both the parents are stateless, they are devoid of nationality, they are devoid of citizenship. What happens is that that statelessness is passed on to the children. And I do mention this in both the articles. In India, I am actually mentioning this as a passing remark, also to criticize the UNHCR, that UNHCR wants to tell a lot when it comes to, how the NRC in Assam will create statelessness. So many people will be rendered stateless if the NRC comes in Assam. But at the same time, it is silent about the children who are being born in India, the Rohingya children, and they are stateless. So UNHCR is, comfortably silent on such issues. When it comes to Bangladesh, again, some Bangladeshi children, some children in Bangladesh have been able to acquire nationality, and primarily it's been those refugees, Rohingya refugees, who did not repatriate in early 1990s. Those who have stayed for a long time in Bangladesh, they have been able to get the documents and even do the schooling. And it's not very difficult to get documents in Bangladesh or when it comes to India. So through all of that, I would say, Jugaad, they have been able to do that. But most of the children of Rohingyas, they continue to suffer from statelessness, and this is called as intergenerational statelessness, wherein you have both India and Bangladesh. They have signed on to the Child Rights Convention, the convention which is praised for being, a convention where most countries have signed on to this convention, but in reality, nothing is followed. So, as a scholar of international organization, I keep on grappling with this thing that there are treaties, there are norms, there is customary international law, and on the other hand, there are states. And it is so difficult to make the states implement norms. It is so difficult to make the states, look for the rights of people. It is just so difficult. And then, if it is so difficult, then does international law really matter? That is the question that is there today. If it is so easy for states to just sign on to a convention and then not follow it, or just sign for formality, or just leave international organizations, does international law really matter today? That is something that is a broader question that I'm looking at, and which my work points to. But yes, this is where I think even your all questions are pointing towards that, the durability, the feasibility, the relevance of international law today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Uh,
Sanjukta, do you have more questions?
no. We can open the question.
So the floor is
Thank you.
open for questions. We already have a question in the chat box, which I'm going to read for everybody's benefit. Suhasini says, given the frequency with which political regimes and political leadership change across countries, how do institutions such as the UNHRC protect themselves from disruptions caused by the idiosyncrasies of individual leaders? How can such organizations maintain institutional autonomy and continuity amid unstable global political currents? I think how you ended, your last answer, probably probably that's where the answer for this one also begins as to, can we trust the international order, or does the international law mean much if it's not upheld? So yes, Tejal, you're cue to answer the question.
So this question is just reminding me of a sarcastic remark that I had passed in one of my in the first article on the UNHCR, that the UNHCR official, one of the chief of the UNHCR had come, Philippi Grandi had come to India. There was a visit of the chief of UNHCR to India, and they praised India for the hospitality that they have shown to the refugees. So it is as simple as that. Come up with media statements praising the governments. Even when it comes to a tragedy like 40 Rohingyas have been just dumped onto the sea. There are 5 refugees, even as I was reading last year, they're just missing from the police station, from the detention center. Uh, UNHCR remains silent on it, or their favorite statement is, "We are saddened to see this. Uh, uh, we urge the governments to take action." So it is very repetitive, those kind of statements that the UNHCR will be making. But I want to actually tell you that there is a typo error in this question which points to a very interesting problem with the UN. So if you see, Suhasini has written UNHRC, that's UN Human Rights Council, and I'm talking about UNHCR, UN High Commissioner for Refugees. And what's interesting to note is that the UN Human Rights Council is very critical of India because they are not having a field mission in India, because it's only on paper where they come up with their reports criticizing India. They will have periodic reviews of the human rights situation in India. So time and again, the special rapporteurs from the UN Human Rights Council would actually be bashing India left, right, and center. But when it comes to UNHCR, that is UN High Commissioner for Refugees, they are very much tight-lipped and they follow a very cautious approach, lest they are thrown out of this country and they will lose the operational access here.
Thank you, Tejal, and thank you, Suhasini, for that question. Do we have more questions from the audiences? You can unmute yourself and ask a question. Okay. Pratham has a long question. Pratham is also my former student from Hindu College, who's now doing his master's from Ambedkar University. And Suhasini is also my former student from Miranda House, who's now doing her PhD from Presidency. And she works in political theory. We were both discussing how our knowledge of IR is in the minus, if there was such a scale. So on that note, Pratham's question, he says, thank you so much for the presentation. It was really insightful. I have two questions. Given the absolute failure of UNHCR, bureaucracy in dealing with the Rohingya refugee crisis and others as well, should the space where we mount our advocacy efforts not shift from global, appealing to the UN and its agencies, and shift to the local, which is pressurizing nation states? Question mark. Relatedly, would things not substantially improve if one were to try to find the solution to the problem of statelessness and refugees outside the framework of the UN, given it becoming increasingly redundant, and in other transnational and interregional forms of cooperation? So regional versus state versus the only Thoda sketchball that I know, I'll bring that in. Should we bring the nation state back in? That's the kind of thing I probably Pratham is asking. Then we have another question by Radhika Mundra, who would probably have to introduce herself if possible. But we'll take Pratham's question first and we'll come to Radhika's question after. Yes, Tejal.
Thank you, Pratham, for that thought-provoking question. As I was reading your question, and especially you mentioned about this transnational, interregional forms of cooperation. One example that I can give you is of Bali process. This is a formal agreement that has come about in Southeast Asia, amongst the ASEAN countries, wherein they are the whole objective of Bali process is to make sure that any refugees that are found, taking, maritime journeys in unseaworthy boats, they should be rescued. And till now, we see every year Rohingyas, several thousands of them, taking the help of, you know, uh, taking the help of several human smugglers, and they are taking these boat journeys. They're trying to flee from Myanmar, from Bangladesh, to making these journeys to Thailand, to Indonesia. And in that process, many of them are also losing their lives. It is not easy to traverse Bay of Bengal. So should we shift to interregional forms of cooperation? Bali process is in front of you. It's an absolute failure. That's how they have said. However, at the same time, I want to praise one of the presidential regulations that had come about in Indonesia, which really wanted that any boat entering the coast of reaching the coast of Indonesia, uh, they will be rescued. Any all the refugees who are taking such journeys, they will be rescued, and they will be given the essential services. So in that sense, so Indonesia, being a non-signatory, was able to come up with its own local law, the presidential regulation, because of which it became a very favorable destination for the Rohingyas. And now even Indonesia has started pushing back the Rohingya boats. So that's the irony, uh, that yes, if you do have favorable state laws, that becomes a pull factor. And then why is it that the burden is only on the global south? Yes, most of the refugee producing countries are in the global south, but does that mean it's only the responsibility of the global south to give them asylum? That's a main question, and that's how even professors such as B.S. Chimney, who take a third world approach to international law, say that why is there not burden sharing when it comes to refugees? And that's primarily the first problem when it comes to just criticizing the refugee frameworks and ad hoc policies of global south. And it's okay if we have not signed on to these conventions. The state practice becomes much more important than the states just ratifying onto the conventions. Also, what I see in your question is this thing of, if something is not working, should we just move on to the next? So in that case, we are really just going to go into forum shopping. Okay, one thing is not working, let's go on to the next. What is the guarantee that the other solution would really work? So, and I have already given you examples of both an interregional cooperation framework that not working, and also a state local law and how it created problems for that state. So, but yes, do I have an answer, a definite answer to your question? No, but I'm leaving you with one more question to think about, as to what do we have then. In the end, what happens is we can keep on having discussions, we can keep on having articles published in Scopus Index journal articles, and in the end, the Rohingyas will continue to be stateless. They will continue to face human rights violations, whereas we continue to discuss solutions in our drawing rooms. That's the sad irony of the whole refugee regime, of the whole stateless regime, as to how do we put really the pressure. In the end, it is the political will of the states that becomes important. um, but one thing what I want to mention is that, there was this question of access that was raised by Sanjukta earlier, that it is difficult for scholars working in global south to even access such international organizations, and it was difficult for me as well. That is why I looked at, my focus was on the implementing partners of UNHCR. UNHCR cannot even survive one day without cooperating with the implementing partners, like the Development and Justice Initiative in the case of Rohingyas, the COVA, the Human Rights Law Network. I feel it is these people who are working on the ground, and they are really concerned about the rights of Rohingya refugees. And their voices are not really paid attention to. They are just dismissed. And this is what my work tried to do, wherein I perhaps tried to put pressure, uh, through my work, on focusing on these actors working on the ground, and what do they have to say about these international organizations like the UNHCR.
Thank you. Thank you, Tejal. I also have something to add to it without having any expert or subject knowledge on the subject, but I'll come to it in a while in terms of international and the national bit. We now have Radhika. Radhika, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Yes, ma'am. Hello. Thank you so much, ma'am, for such an insightful discussion. So I'm pursuing my PhD in climate-induced displacement. So my question is that you have extensively discussed on bureaucratic pathologies and rigidity that inhibits any meaningful solution. And we can also see the case of institutional pathologies at domestic level. Like if we see in the case of India, there is no such refugee policy or a policy on accommodating displaced people. And along with that, we do not have any regional level policy also. Like, for example, like we have Kampala Declaration as an African Union declaration, right? But in South Asia, there is no such regional solution also. So my question is, can we have any, like in the case of India, can we have a institutional framework, like through constitutional inclusion, by including the rights of those displaced or refugees? Can that thing can be there, and can it solve the overall problem of refugee crisis in India? Like you have also mentioned that how India's policy has been very much selective. So how we can accommodate that issue through constitutional inclusion?
Okay. Can I answer this?
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
And I think we have another question. Meera has her hand
Mira
raised.
has there, yeah.
After, there's a reason we're all smiling, and we'll tell you people that. But after Tejal has answered this question, we'll go to Meera, who can ask her question.
Okay. Um, while you are talking about constitutional inclusion, I'm really pessimistic about it. Why? Because right to a clean environment is already there as a constitutional right. It has been you know it has been seen in several of the court judgments. So that actually answers that when we have a right to a clean environment, why are we not enforcing things like simple thing of not smoking in a public place? Is that, are we even able to enforce that? No. um, Again, it's an environment thing. And yes, you are talking about the intersection between climate change and that causing displacement, and that is also a forced displacement. But I want you to look at something which is so solvable, a clean environment, which is constitutionally recognized, but what is happening at the implementation level. So maybe, yes, we can have an amendment to the constitution, uh, recognizing the displaced people who are facing climate change, are more vulnerable when it comes to natural disasters. But what will happen to the implementation is the question. That is where we all are coming to. So yes, pathologies do exist at the domestic level. These dysfunctional behaviors are there at the domestic level as well. So and can we then solve it with the regional law? Uh, I would say again, the context differ. Yes, the Kampala Convention has been, I would say, much more. Um, uh, you know, uh, the whole African region as such, they are always spearheading the effort to have a regional framework. It's not just the Kampala Convention, but there is this Banjul Plan of Action wherein they look at the whole problem of statelessness also. So I would say that they're always the pioneers in coming up with these regional frameworks. But we will have to scrutinize and see the effectiveness of those frameworks. Um, are those regional plans really able to have the effect of really solving the issue or not? Um, are they able, or are those regional plans able to, push the states to implement and to uphold their commitments that they have under the regional action plan? Is what something we must see. And perhaps what works in Africa may not just work in South Asia, because two regions are entirely different. So there is a lot of pessimism in the questions and in the answers. So I don't know where to go from this, but yeah, I just again think that even if it is included in the constitution, what next? Will it really lead to implementation?
Thank you, Tejal. Meera, if you're here, Meera Bharadwaj. Meera
Hello,
happens to be on the other
ladies.
side of academics. She's in the advocacy and has probably worked, if I'm not wrong, I don't want to speak out of turn, but has worked with the UN for a very long
Yes.
time. So,
Yes.
so
Yep.
over to Mira's question.
Hello, hi ladies. First of all, I
Hi.
mean, can you guys hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
I wish we could
Yeah.
also see you. And for
Yes.
the rest of the participants who are not being able to understand the sweet smile on Tejal, Sanjukta, and my faces, because we're all batchmates. We all attended undergrad together, and we're classmates from the same
The re
batch at
the
MEd.
the reunion we thought we did not.
So
Yeah, I
that is where
mean,
this
I
is coming
can't tell
from.
you, this might be like, let me take a second to have a personal moment of pride. I can't tell you how proud I am to listen to Dr. Khanna and Dr. Nath and Dr. Sogarwal talk about such heavy, important topics of regional, national, international significance. It's amazing, and especially given the kind of environment, the mindless, non-academic environment I work in currently. What a breath of fresh air this conversation was. It's can't even begin to describe it. I just raised my hand to say hi to you, wonderful ladies, and second, as Jigyasa pointed out, that being somebody who has been with these institutions for the greater part of the last decade, I would just like to kind of not just second what Dr. Khanna is trying to say, uh, but if you people want like some more evidence to support it, or personal anecdotes and example to say that that is the sad reality of the way not just UNHCR, or since Sanjukta mentioned CRCs, UNICEF, or UNHRC for that matter, because I have been personally associated with all three institutions in a direct professional capacity. um, Even people who are working there are, we all very much knew what a toothless organization we had become in the last decade. Especially, I mean, with the new regime change, the hands being tied for your work to happen does not just happen from your HQ or from your regional offices for these international organizations. It very much happens at the state and the national level also. So political will does not just impede the work of the government and the legislature, it very much affects everyday functioning in all of the international organizations who have a mandate or do not have a mandate in the country. Like even something like a UNHRC, which, as Tejal rightly pointed out, cannot come and open an office here because they don't have that right. But if you notice the number of special rapporteurs that have been allowed to come visit the country last 10-15 years is also crazy. The number just keeps dropping. We keep going to Geneva and shouting and asking for these people to come to our state, but then they're like, somebody has to accept our response. Every uh, country, I mean, irrespective of whatever their political interest is looking at India right now, whether to bring the administration down or to just point fingers or just to, I don't know, show support, alliance, whatever, to send these rapporteurs to India. They keep asking questions. Every session of council, you will have at least, if not more, 15 to 20 rapporteurs writing to the government to accept the request, but it does not happen. So that environment that Tejal so rightly explained, it is not just dysfunctional, it is rotten to the core at the moment. And you absolutely cannot function with not just your hands tied behind your back, but you're also feet nailed to the ground in a way that your implementation partners, which most UN agencies today operate via, because they can't have a project of their own at the ground, especially in India. I mean, that's a very, very clear mandate for all international organizations that if UNICEF wants to start a project on labor, for example, or on refugees in West Bengal, they can't do so. They will have to do go via the implementation partner routes. But that is also a very tricky situation, because that implementation means that they are the direct donors and funders. So, I mean, I'm surprised the organizations that you pointed out, they even said that something is wrong and we need to address it. Because in our case, what we saw, most of the organizations working with children today, they've even stopped coming up and questioning the actions and the mandate of these respective agencies, because e- everyone is everyone cares about the funding and the money that they get for the project. So they know if we do not toe the line beyond a point, we are going to lose business. I mean, for the lack of a better word. So, yeah, I mean, this is also for UN agencies, it's a situation where you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, because the government will not take a second to throw you out of the country. And we know how ex I won't say extremist, but we know how the entire world order is becoming in today's time. So the question that you asked, Tejal, then do we really do away with these agencies? I mean, there is still some merit to their existence, because if nothing, somebody from I'm talking about actual ground realities, somebody from a UNICEF going every day and sitting in front of a chief secretary in the WCD, pointing fingers and saying, listen, 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 we need a new legislation, we need a new even if that can happen, that is more than what the government today is willing to do. So yes, massive course correction and reforms are needed at the international level, at the regional level, at the national level for these agencies, but it will not happen without a massive political upheaval. I would like to say. That's all. I did not have a question. I just wanted to back my girls.
Thank you, Meera, and it's a high right back at you. I would take a moment to kind of then, from what the presentation that we've had, which was academic, research based, for someone who's probably going to the field to get a sense of the field and to report on it from an academic's point of view. And then we've also had someone who's worked in these organizations for years and coming back and saying, oh, you aren't saying it's bad enough. It is worse than what you're saying. Also goes on to say that there's a certain way in which the field experience in terms of being a practitioner and an advocacy expert, and someone who's working on it from a research point of view, there's a certain way in which both sets could come together to tell you that the problem is real and it's there. And in that sense, I find both what Tejal has been relating for the last 1.5 hours and what Meera just said to be of profound importance, because it kind of ties two sides of two loose ends. Because mostly what happens is that we're told that, we sit in ivory towers and we don't really know what's going on the ground, and our research is more theoretical and fancy. But sometimes, not always, but sometimes, work that's done from an academic point of view is able to kind of push itself into the real world. And that, I think, is the point of how important and crucial, and probably how honest Tejal has been with her field, because this would not have been reflected if this was just something that she'd done superficially and done like a thick literature review. This actually also goes on to tell us that this work is coming from the ground and some serious passionate energy has gone into building her field work. So many congratulations to both of you, and for your experiences and the work that you've done in this area. I would now request that if there are more questions, they be addressed to hopefully Tejal's email ID, if she's willing for us to have it. And Dak would share it with the video recording of this particular session that's usually made available on our YouTube channel. We've exceeded the time that we usually have for the TheDaak Baithak, and therefore we'll have to not take more questions after this, because our speaker and ourselves, we could have more commitments. So we'll have to close the session here. And if Tejal, if you have, we'll give the last 2 minutes to you. If you have anything to add to what Meera has just said, or to any other, if you want to respond to any other question or something else that you want to do in terms of tying up this discussion, then we'll go on to the vote of thanks.
Thank you so much, Meera, for that, very insightful, uh, what would I say? Very insightful experience of you working in those organizations. And I was just thinking how the same BA political science degree in Miranda House College leads to two different paths, and we are again uniting and coming up with the same conclusion. So it is a full circle, and I am also quite emotional at this time. When we look at our own batchmates, we see what kind of career paths they have taken, and for a fact, and just to come together through this, platform, and discuss our own journeys. I think this has been a remarkable way to do alumni meet, actually. And I've never been part of any alumni meets of Miranda House College, and I think this has been the most meaningful one, the first and the best one. And thank you so much for the engaging questions as well. I never thought that I would be able to actually answer all those questions. To be honest, I was quite terrified that it is a politically sensitive topic and how would I be able to handle such questions. But um, really, I was able to do that, and I thank God. So, yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity. Really, it means a lot to present my work and to also engage with the young scholars. I wish all of them good luck with their PhDs. And as Jigyasa said, and I would want to second that, just be honest in your research, and I'm sure you will make a powerful impact. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Tejal Khanna, for accepting our request and sharing your important work with DAAK as a platform. We are, some of us are young and some of us are not, but we are a young group of dynamic people. We started in the hostel rooms of our respective universities across the country, and we've now been running for a good 3 years, and Baithak started last year. And we come back with one academic topic every Saturday. We try to, at least. And our efforts have been that we push the envelope for young researchers, early career scholars. And in that endeavor, I think we've remained honest and true to ourselves. So thank you so much to all our participants who come back every week to listen to some of what we're doing, to Dr. Khanna for accepting the request and spending her time here, to our discussant, Dr. Sanjukta Nath, for coming forward to discuss the two papers, to read them, to have brought up very important questions to this discussion. And for those of all who stayed back to engage in questions as well, thank you so much. I wish you all a happy weekend. And we'll meet again next Saturday at 4 p.m. Thank you so much. I sound like I'm a TV host who says, "Fir isi samay agle hafte, agle saptah milenge." But I think we're all in the business of selling knowledge as entertainment. And if we could do that, if we could get serious conversation out there as entertainment, even that would make a lot of difference to us. Thank you so much, and good night.